Welcome to Undercurrents, our daily news show from Unheard's Washington Bureau. Today's guest is Maurice Mitchell. Subscribe at undercurrents.tv to join the Undercurrents community. It is just $1 for your first month. You get to correspond with us and have premium paywalled episodes, so make sure to head over there. Subscribe here on the channel or wherever you're downloading your podcasts. Now let's get on to the news. You may remember former Minnesota Representative Dean Phillips, a Democrat. He tried to mount a long shot bid against Joe Biden in the Democratic presidential primary when almost nobody else would. His politics aren't super easily categorized as moderate or progressive. He's definitely business friendly. He's not quite fully either moderate or progressive, though he did, flirt with the idea of running on a centrist no labels ticket at one point during that primary. He had a very interesting point on CNN recently that went viral. I want to take a look at this.
Unfortunately, Democrats are only focused on one thing right now, Mr. Musk. The fact of the matter, he's quite popular. He has the largest platform in human history, which is, of course, Twitter/X. And I think we're missing the boat as Democrats. And all I'm saying is that sometimes it's better to join them and actually play a role in how the strategy works, rather than so pathetically, frankly, try to combat something that clearly is a steamroller, and Democrats are being steamrolled. And I'm deeply concerned about that. Yes, Musk is not elected. He has no accountability other than Donald Trump, and that's a frightening combination. And I don't want to cross my fingers. I think Democrats should join the club and then have more credibility to actually raise the alarm about constitutional issues. Right now, it's the boy who cried wolf.
So this was everywhere. According to YouGov's tracker, Elon Musk's popularity among adults is actually up a bit since the fall when he campaigned really hard for Trump. Even so, less than a majority of adults say they like or really like Musk. A new poll finds that DOGE's popularity is similar. It's about 49% overall. So Gallup summed up polling on the question of government waste after Trump won in November, writing, quote, "Americans, when asked, say the government is inefficient and wasteful." Here's more, quote, "A Pew Research poll in April, for example, showed that 56% of U.S. adults agreed that the government is almost always wasteful and inefficient. Gallup polling earlier this year showed that 58% of Americans are dissatisfied with the size and power of the federal government. A slight majority of Americans say the government has too much power. 7 in 10 Americans in 2019 agreed that businesses can do things more efficiently than the federal government. And older Gallup research has shown that Americans think at least half of all money spent by the federal government is wasted." It's the end of the quote. So on the one hand, Americans, and Democrats in particular, do not want their party to greenlight oligarchy or corruption. But they also likely don't want Democrats obstructing efforts to make, for example, the Pentagon more efficient and less wasteful. So they're kind of in a bit of a pickle. It's not an easy balance to strike, but melting down outside USAID, I'm just not so sure that's the answer. Maurice Mitchell is the National Director of the Working Families Party. He joins us today to discuss Elon Musk and more as he works on the grassroots level to promote the Working Families Party on the ground. Maurice, thank you for being here.
It's good to be with you.
Want to optimize your metabolism? I found a powerful tool that helps, Lumen. Lumen is a handheld metabolic coach that measures your metabolism through your breath. The app shows if you're burning fat or carbs and provides personalized guidance on nutrition, workouts, and sleep. Just breathe into Lumen each morning. It reveals your metabolic state and gives you a tailored nutrition plan. Use it before and after workouts or meals for real-time insights into your body's fuel source. Your metabolism affects weight, energy, fitness, and sleep. Lumen helps optimize it. It even adapts to hormonal changes, helping manage energy and cravings over time. Take control of your metabolic health today. Visit lumen.me/undercurrents for 20% off. That's lumen.me/undercurrents for 20% off. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. Now, my first question is, what is the Working Families Party? Tell us about what you guys do.
Well, the Working Families Party is a national political movement. And, a simple way to understand what we're about, when I'm talking to everyday people and they're frustrated with the Republican Party, which, is clearly the party of the billionaires, and the Democratic Party, which a lot of people feel have lost its way, they're looking for something else. And we're building that something else. And we have been working for 26 years on the grassroots level, because governing happens on every single level. And we endorse close to 1,000 everyday working class champions on school board, city council, state legislature. And we even every 4 years endorsed for the presidency. And we build all of that grassroots, independent third party power in order to pull the entire political establishment closer to everyday working people.
And you just mentioned something really interesting, which is the Republican Party being the party of the billionaires. And it's hard to look at Elon Musk literally running the government and say, no, the Republican Party is the bulwark against oligarchy, even though Musk positions himself as sort of the anti-oligarch. It's all, crazy. But there was that line from a major, Democratic official recently saying that the Democrats were the party of the good billionaires. And as someone sort of outside of that apparatus, how do you look at, I mean, is this the problem with the two-party system? Is that how you see it, that there's just two parties owned by billionaires, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I think, living in a country where you have endless choices when it comes to the type of yogurt that you want,
Yeah.
but you only have two real viable choices for president, there's a problem. We think the two-party system itself and our system of government, our electoral system itself, is an impediment to democracy. And one of the reasons why Elon Musk was standing there in the Oval Office, proudly, loudly, defiantly thumbing his nose at everybody, right? That was him basically saying, yes, I bought your election. I now run the country, and there's nothing you could do about it. And we didn't get here overnight. We got here because our political system tolerated big money getting into our politics, tolerated the undue influence of wealthy people, uber wealthy people, corporations, and billionaires. Once you crack that window open, it just leads to this escalation of concentrated money and power. And where we are right now, where it's rule, not even by the few, rule by a handful of billionaires and the richest person on the planet. This idea that somehow he's the oligarch, it's Elon, but it's also that billionaires row. I want to remind people who watched the inauguration, it was the number 1, 2, and 3 richest people on the planet, all sitting there acquiescing to Trump and to MAGA, but also sitting there because they understood that they would have access and they would be able to move the direction of the American government in the direction of their profits. That's very, very alarming. And again, the two-party system, the people in both parties that would rather pick up the phone when a lobbyist calls than their constituents, they led the building blocks to this now where the house that we live in, which is like, partially or completely owned by the oligarch class. And the reason why the Working Families Party exists is because we believe that democracy still means rule by the people. And it sounds crazy. I know it sounds crazy, but in a democracy, the people should govern, not the billionaires, not corporations. And the only way we can make that happen is through a grassroots movement. We need to take the wheel. People like Elon Musk, people like Donald Trump, the billionaire class, the elites, they've driven us from one crisis to another. And ultimately, we think it's our job not to elect one party that's going to give the wheel to one set of billionaires, like the nicer billionaires, or another party that's going to give the wheel to the mean billionaires. It's time for us to take the wheel as working people.
So it's funny because a lot of people on the right now have this ideological commitment to rule by the people. And they use some of the same descriptions that you just did, or some of the same sort of sentiments you just did when they're talking about the bureaucracy. Even Elon Musk sort of echoes some of that. And Dean Phillips was on CNN recently. Obviously, he's a Democrat and was allied with, no labels, was flirting with the no labels run briefly. Yeah. Definitely not an anti-corporate Democrat, that is for sure. But he was talking about how for Democrats to oppose, or the left more broadly, to oppose everything that DOGE is doing when, for example, and I'm curious your experience on this, Maurice, a lot of people look at the Pentagon and they look at, people in DC at all of these agencies and they say, well, yeah, we probably can cut waste at the Pentagon. Does it risk sort of looking like defense of the status quo to be totally against Elon Musk and the sort of Republican oligarchy? Like, how do you walk that line or balance that task?
It's very clear to me. So imagine if I broke into your house, I tied you and your family up, and I stole all of your most cherished possessions. And then before I left, I promised you that I was doing it for your own good, right? Imagine if that happened.
I was better than the
So,
other thief, right? Like I'm the good thief.
right?
Yeah.
I'm the good thief. Trust me, this is for your own good. You know, in that scenario, I would say, don't focus on what I say. Look at what I do. And that's the same for Elon Musk and DOGE, right? They claim that they are there to root out corruption and waste. And on its face, like, who would argue that that's a bad thing,
Hmm.
right? But don't listen to what they say. Look at what they're doing,
Hmm.
right? And so far, what they've done is focus on potentially cutting money from Medicaid and Social Security and USAID, which is a fraction of the budget that goes to needy people around the world who need life-saving medicine. And they haven't focused on the billions of dollars of contracts that go to SpaceX, that go to Elon Musk and his corporations, right? They're focusing on a fraction of the budget that actually goes to things like they're scrutinizing um, they're scrutinizing programs like lunches for school children instead of scrutinizing contracts from corporations like many of the corporations that Elon Musk runs. He's making millions and millions of dollars a day from the government. And look, let's not focus on the word government because it sounds like this other thing, right? Government is simply what we collectively decide to do with all the stuff that we share and how we share it. It's our stuff. Government is not some outside thing. So it's a smash and grab robbery while they claim they're somehow doing something altruistic. So I say, don't focus on their words, look at their actions. And it is a blatant and obscene robbery. You know, one of the things that people have trouble understanding, they're like, well, he's the richest person on the planet. Why would a billionaire rob from us? Why would a billionaire steal? Well, number one, if you're having trouble understanding that it's because you're a regular person and you have to work for a living. Number two, the way that people like Donald Trump and Elon Musk became rich was through theft, right? Stealing people's ideas, exploiting workers, exploiting other people's, intellectual property. This is how they actually got their wealth. This is what they understand. And look, I can't explain the psychology of a billionaire. I don't know why after you've made 1 billion, you'd want to make two. Why after you've made 50 billion, you'd want to make 50, 55. Why after being the richest person on earth, you would want to figure out how to make more money. But it is a naked grab for money and power. Those contracts come with scrutiny, right? So all of those government contracts come with some level of scrutiny, come with investigations. And Elon has an interest in making sure that the government does not look into his business, simply writes checks.
Over the course of the last week, I've seen some people on the left point to Ro Khanna, Greg Kassar as examples of how to kind of leap over the culture war hurdle and talk to working class voters who may be deeply suspicious of folks on the left because of some of these culture war roadblocks. And I'm curious how you handle that. I'm not on the ground like talking to voters and in the grassroots. I have to imagine that's sort of a tricky endeavor.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm an organizer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've organized people across difference my entire life. And one of the things that I'm really clear about is as different as we are and as many disagreements we might have, like, thank God for our differences, actually. Thank God for our disagreements. It makes life so much more interesting, right? I wouldn't want us all to agree on everything. Um, the one thing that I know for sure is that we have so much more in common. Whether or not you might have all types of opinions on my way of life, I might have all types of opinions on the way that you choose to live your life. We have so much more in common than we have in common with people like Elon Musk, people like Donald Trump, people like Jeff Bezos, right? They seek to, they wake up every single day and they think that life is a movie and that they're the main character, and we all are simply extras, right? And it doesn't matter what your racial background is, what region of the country you come from, whether or not you believe that you're part of red America or blue America, you're simply an extra in the mind of people like Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And so it's time for all of us, the quote unquote extras, to take over the set. And they're stealing from us. They're stealing money, right? Because the government, that's our money. They're stealing from us. And they're also stealing power. And I think it's time for all of us to get together, whatever real differences we have. I'm not going to pretend that those differences are going to go away, but let's get over some of these differences so that we could get some of our money and power back. And then we could, once we have our money and power back, we could argue about those differences, but with those oligarchs away from the money that we've earned, and the power that we deserve.
And you posted something really interesting, and it's something that we've been talking about on the show a bit. You said you had thousands more people than you expected show up for a mass call. And I'm really curious about that because
Yep.
it seems to me it's possible there is a lot of energy on the left, and this is a target-rich environment. And I'm curious for your experience just in the first month of the Trump presidency as an organizer, what you've sensed on the ground.
Yeah, people are really fired up. And you know, in some ways, and I've been organizing and I've been telling this story about concentrated wealth
Hmm.
and why billionaires and corporations are so problematic. Why even the existence of somebody like Elon Musk in a world where so many people in this country are living in poverty, that is an example of how problematic our system is. I've always talked about those things. But today, those contradictions, those problems are so clear to so many people. So what we've experienced is this deluge
Hmm.
of everyday people wanting to take action, wanting to do something about the theft. And we've done phone banks where we're calling into our congressional members so that they understand that the people want them to fight back against this. And we've had to cap our phone bank. We actually had to cap it. There were way too many people for our phone bank because there's that much excitement about getting involved. People are not taking this laying down. People are deeply disturbed by the idea of our country and our federal government being completely captured by corporations. And that's exciting to me because I truly believe that the people have the power, that people, like our hard work, is what runs the economy, right? It's not what some hedge fund manager does or what some folks trade on Wall Street. Is actually our ideas and our hard work. And I also believe that it is us, what we choose to do together. That is what the democracy is. And so when we decide, enough of us decide that we need to move in a different direction, that's what will happen, no matter who the opponent is. And so I'm sensing that the people are beginning to come together and want to take action. And the thing is, the harm, the pain, the suffering is visiting so many different people's homes, right? So there are Trump voting folks in rural country in Missouri that their livelihood is rural and they run farms. These farmers are now waking up to the reality that precious resources from the Inflation Reduction Act are not going to go to their farms and is actually creating a crisis for them. These are people who voted for Trump. These are not, liberals or liberal activists, whatever. These are people who believed Trump when he said that he was going to make their lives better. Those folks are beginning to wake up to it and are beginning to organize. You have everyday people. And again, we talk about this country like there's a left right binary, like there's a red America and a blue America, like there's MAGA people, and then there's the resistance people. In reality, um, Head Start parents are all over this country, are in rural country, are in urban country. People who depend on public education. It turns out that rural country and red states depend so much more on the federal government in general, but just with education, they are really on the hook for those federal resources. And in a lot of these rural communities, their public schools and public education are one of the foundations and institutions that allow public life to flourish in that entire community. So people across differences are feeling the pain of what it looks like when a out of control billionaire decides to, experiment with all the stuff that is actually our stuff, the stuff that we collectively should be making decisions on and should be protecting, the government. And so this is going to be, I think, a moment that is going to blur a lot of these divisions, and you're going to see a lot of, unlikely partnerships where you're going to see those rural farmers join with urban mothers, join with people across race, join with folks who might have lost their jobs, who are hardworking people who are trying to deliver, and whose jobs actually help bring down those resources to community centers and to schools and to Medicare and Medicaid and things that people really care about. So I think this is going to be the beginning of a moment that will probably create all types of new relationships and scramble some of these binaries and some of the tribal divisions that have kind of held us hostage and allowed the billionaires to kind of, just sort of like run the table. I think this is, it's unfortunate, but what they're doing is so severe and could hurt so many people that potentially the outcome could be a movement that could bring so many people together.
And my last question is, Gen Z has a lot of material concerns. In some ways, I mean, if you just look at student loan debt, I mean, more
Yeah.
significant material concerns than others. And yet there's this drift rightward, especially among young men. A CBS poll that came out last weekend actually saw Trump doing fairly well with Gen Z women too. How do you explain that shift, despite, the sort of material reality that Gen Z is facing right now?
It, it makes a lot of sense to me when I think about the position that a lot of folks in Gen Z are in. Um, when you look at the subprime mortgage collapse and you think about the crisis of affordability, you think about climate change, at the climate crisis, and all of these crises that many people in Gen Z have lived through, are living through, the prospects for somebody who's thinking about going to college or in college or leaving college, um, the debt that people are saddled with, and the system that led to that. People, especially young people, um, are understandably and righteously have an anger and have developed a complete loss of faith in the system. And I think there's a portion of folks that are voting for and leading into whatever the option that at least seems to be the option that wants to break the system and change the system. And in the last election, Trump ran, even though he was a former president, he ran on two things, and it's both of those things are cons. He ran as the person that will challenge the system, and he also ran as the person that would lower your prices. They're both cons for different reasons, but if you're looking for something outside of the status quo, I understand why some people might, again, look at what they're saying instead of what they're doing and see some appeal there.
Hmm.
Now, what I know is that at the end of the day, if you really want to break the system, then it's not about voting for one set of elites and giving the ball from one set of elites to another set of elites. It's about building the power of the people so that everyday people could actually take the ball and take the wheel. That's how you actually break the system. It's by demanding from the grassroots what we've always deserved. And I think this is a critical time for people in Gen Z or for young people to get involved in organizations, get involved in organizations outside of the two-party system, like the Working Families Party, to run for office. But I think some of that is probably because people are fed up. And he suggested that he might be a wrecking ball to the system, but he's a billionaire with a bunch of oligarchs, and I can't think of something more pro status quo than lining up with a bunch of oligarchs and the wealthiest people on the planet. Again, it's a con. If you really want to disrupt the status quo, that starts in your community. That starts with you taking the lead. That starts with you no longer looking for politicians to be the main character and for us to simply be the extras, but for you to be the main character.
Maurice, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking through this.
It was really good to be with you.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's edition of Undercurrents. Really appreciate it. Could definitely have gone back and forth with Maurice for longer, but I do think it's very interesting that there is something bubbling beneath the surface on the left that, people on the right saying the left is just demoralized might come to see something differently 6 months or a year down the road. I still think that some of those farmers in Missouri, Maurice mentioned, probably don't blame Trump. They probably blame a broken system. I think it's really hard to navigate the culture war minefield. I think Elon Musk is obviously still a very complicated question because personally, I think trimming some parts of the bureaucracy is populist. I think it is a more just way for the working class, frankly, who forks over their taxpayer dollars to go to USAID spying on them. So all of that is to say, or censoring them, I should say, not spying on them. But we're all being spied on too. So all that is to say, this is a very, very difficult balance, I think, for the left to strike right now. You don't want to look like you're defending the status quo, but you want to look like you're opposing oligarchy. I think the smash and grab robbery point Maurice made is very, very interesting. You can probably tell I myself don't know exactly how to think about what's happening with Elon Musk right now. As a conservative, I'm sort of just reflexively opposed to oligarchy and have been for a very long time. So it's very strange to watch this all play out. Not surprising, but strange because, we don't have to have a verdict right at this very moment. I'm sort of avoiding coming down really hard on one direction or the other, despite the fact that I do come down pretty hard on this argument that suddenly it's okay to have good oligarchs. So all that is to say, it's hard enough for the right to handle. It's definitely not going to be easy for the left over the course of the last several months. So maybe they can harness some of that grassroots energy. We will see. Maybe we'll check in with Maurice again later. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back with more Undercurrents soon.